truly that what you are thinking about today, I would suggest that probably 95% of your thoughts during the day, you have no idea what they are.
Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast,
a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudy and Aniston, and this is Empowered Life. Sarah Centrella, we're talking about a 3 times best-selling author, somebody who has taken what has happened to her in life and turned it into the success of who she is today. But more importantly to me, she's doing something so beautiful and so profound with it. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudy Ricksteins, and I'm really excited to bring our new guest out and front and center today. I recently connected with her through a dear mutual friend, Justin Schenk, and he is just an incredible human being. Before we hit record, he was, we were talking about what a great connector is and what a great human being he is. And he had texted me saying, Rudy, I've got somebody I need you to meet. And when he texted me the message, my response was, before I heard who it was, I said, Justin, any friend of yours is guaranteed a friend of mine because you are salt of the earth and you only bring incredible people into other people's lives. It's like he just has this amazing energy around him that draws people in. Having had the opportunity to connect with Sarah Centrella before we hit record today, I could tell right away we are going to be soul brothers and sisters and that we are definitely cut from the same cloth. I love everything about who she is and how she shows up in the world. To give you some context, we're talking about a 3 times best-selling author, somebody who has taken what has happened to her in life and turned it into the success of who she is today. But more importantly to me, she's doing something so beautiful and so profound with it. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to learn all about you, what you're doing, and how you're creating an impact out and in the world.
Thanks so much for having me on, Rudy. And I just got to echo that shout out to Justin. I mean, if your listeners aren't already following him and following his podcast, do it right now because he's one of those incredible people who pours into everyone that is around him and makes me want to step up and be a better person. So love you, Justin. Thanks for this connection. We're about to have an awesome conversation. Can't wait to jump into it. Thanks a lot, Rudy.
Absolutely. So Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I like to start off everything by acknowledging time and that you being here is just such an incredible gift for our listeners. And I wanted to ask you right up front, I'd love to start with a question. What does living an empowered life mean to you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it is being conscious of the choices that you're making. And to me, empowerment means that I have tools, I have options that when I'm faced with decisions, adversity, you name it, I have resources, and that doesn't always mean money, doesn't mean anything like that, but tools is really, to me, the definition of being empowered or having empowerment in my life. In other words, I can take on whatever life, throws at me, and I am choosing how I show up, how I move forward, whether I take opportunities or don't take opportunities. And I think that's the big difference in my life the last 10 or 15 years versus the first 35 is now I know that I have tools, I have ways to maneuver life. It's not always going to go my way, but regardless, I always have options. I always have a different way to look at it. I have a way to learn a lesson. And that to me is being empowered, having choices, having options.
If I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would have put a lot of money on you having a response like that, just because of who you are and how you show up in the world today. At the Empowered Life Podcast, we talk about every single moment is always preparing you for who you get to become. And that when you become that person, your responsibility is to turn around and teach it. And in true fashion, you're the poster child for what does it look like to have gone through adversity and turn around and done something with that. And so I'd like to bring our audience up to speed in who you are if they don't already follow you and they haven't already divulged your books and just dove into who you are. I heard that you got a divorce in around about 2008 and it came as a surprise. And all of a sudden you were now left having to fend for yourself and life took a very, very dramatic and unexpected turn. And, to set the stage, you were at one point in time the breadwinner in your family, and then you had kids, and then the role reversed. And I can tell you that's happened in my marriage more times than I can count. We've swapped over who's the breadwinner to support each other. But to be left holding the bag, so to speak, and you now don't have an income, you haven't been working in 2 years, and all of a sudden you're out and alone and you've got to figure this out, and you're now a single mother. And to take that moment and turn around and create the life that you've created right now takes a tremendous amount of grit and resilience and determination, but it couldn't have always been there. And so I'm just curious if you could share with us, what was it that really supported you in going from such a low moment to getting into action? Because I think people get stuck in being able to go from a negative situation and start taking action. And yet, if I look at you, your life, and everything you've achieved, you just seem to only take action. So what helped you get there?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, my whole journey to where I am today started, like you said, in 2007, 2008, when I found out my husband was cheating. And it not only ended our marriage, in no joke, 10 minutes. He was in the shower when I found out, turned water off in the shower, said, hit the road. This is not the life for me. I don't know how I'm going to survive, but I am not going to sit back and be okay with someone who is having a completely double life on me. And so it left me instantaneously with nothing. I'm not kidding. The water had been, turned off earlier that day. All of our bills were 2-3 months past due. It was recession time. We just filed bankruptcy. It was like the worst possible situation to be in. And I had 3 little kids. I had a 5-year-old and twins that were 1.5 years. And so I just remember that day trying, as a lot of us would, to figure out, what do I do next? Like, I couldn't even process what the heck was happening to my life or my marriage. I was just like, what do I do tomorrow? Like, where do I get formula? Like, how do I, put gas in the car, the basic stuff, because I knew everything, was in his name, and instantaneously I had access to absolutely nothing. And so that night, I think my brain was already going like, what do I do? I'm very action oriented. Like you said, I'm always looking for, I want to be able to take action, because maybe that's a control thing, but that is something I can control, right? Just sitting there and doing nothing, everything feels out of my control. But if I can sit there and try and like solve the problem and go, okay, well, what do I do tomorrow? How do I get a house I can afford? How do I get a job? All of those things. Then I can put focus in an area that helps me to not think about the implosion, the negative that's happening in the current circumstances, but helps me to kind of think forward, right? Think about like what I want and how to get that. And I think a little bit of that has always been innate in me. I always say there's born hustlers. In other words, like, not hustlers in the negative connotation that we think, but hustlers in the way of like, I'm going to figure it out. I'll do whatever it takes. I will take 5 jobs if I have to. I'll do it. I've been that way since I was a kid, so that just kind of kicked into high gear in that moment. But if someone isn't a hustler, it's okay. You can learn how to do that too. So I think for me, to answer your question of like, how did I transition out of that into anything positive? Because everything about that situation was so dark. It was really looking at, what can I do kind of one step at a time? What can I do tomorrow? Okay, great. What can I do the next day? Sorting things out, even from a basic standpoint of writing them down. Like, this is what I need. This is where I need to go. And so I think a lot of times we're so overwhelmed in situations like that we tend to completely shut down and lock down. And I didn't have the luxury of even doing that. I had 3 kids that were going to need to eat regardless of if I was going through a breakdown or not. And honestly, that probably helped. It probably gave me a lot of motivation to figure it out faster.
What do you think was the greatest gift that you got out of that entire period? Because you just described it as, a really dark period in your life, and that you could have spiraled, but you got into the idea of, I'm going to now create something, and I'm going to do something, and I'm never going to put myself in that position ever again. And I know I'm stealing words that you've used in other platforms, but you got into doing. And in a moment, we're going to tell people about these incredible books that you've written, that you're a master coach, and that you are changing and transforming people's lives at mass scale. But you had to learn that somehow. And so I'm
Yeah.
just curious if you could find a beautiful story out of what was a very difficult and dark period for you that set you up for the woman that you have ultimately become today.
Oh my God. First of all, everything that came out of that was a gift. It didn't feel like a gift in any way when it was happening, but everything has led to where I'm at today. But I think the most pivotal thing or insight or acknowledgement that I had of finding my empowerment was honestly the night that he left. I was laying on the floor and I was just thinking, like, what do I do? How do I do this? How do I get a job? How do I, like, logistically, my head was just spinning. Like, it felt like I had to go solve it tomorrow. And every situation that I was running in my head, I was like, well, I can't get a job because I don't have daycare. Well, I can't, get daycare because I don't have, everything was like all these, situations that I was running had dead ends at every turn. And I just kept on saying, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I can't do this. And there was a moment, and I swear it was whatever you believe in. It was that intuition, God, universe, name it, whatever you want. But it was almost like this voice that came back as strong and as calm as can be and just said, what if you can? That was it. It was just arguing my point. It was just, I'm sitting here, I can't. It was like, but what if you could? And honest to God, that started everything, because it was a lifeline in the middle of an ocean of darkness. It was like the one thing I could grab onto. And what I realized is that as soon as I started going, well, what if I could? Then I started kind of mapping out options, right? Because just automatically, and anyone can do this, it's the best trick in the freaking book, whenever your brain is saying, what if that goes wrong? Because that's how we usually flesh out that sentence. We're finding all the things that could go wrong. All you have to do is flip it the other way and say, well, what if it went better than I thought? What if I was more successful? Whatever. And as soon as you do that, then it almost kind of forces you to create a path with next steps, with like a future endpoint, all of those things. And so, the next day I was like, well, what if I could get a place to live? What would I need to do first? And so that kind of like dug me out of that hole one little step at a time. And I started by selling everything I owned on Craigslist, so it helped me like figure out, okay, I could do that. Okay, I could do this. And it has kind of been that little thread that has led to everything else and every other kind of aha moment, because it forced me to have hope in a really hopeless kind of situation, but then automatically led to me figuring out action that didn't immediately feel like there was any.
I don't think people understand the value in what you just said until they've lived it. And to feel debilitated and stuck and not have the ability to create a shift in any area, and everything looks like a dead end, and then to ask a more empowering question so that you can access more information, so that you can create coherence in the brain, so you can think logically with reason, ration, and inspiration, intuition. Right. And all of a sudden you start taking action and your life looks very different. This all obviously happened in around 2008. And then in 2016, you decided you were going to write a book. You published a book and it hit #1. And you've since written 2 more books, and they've both been best-selling books, and you create such incredible impact. So Hustle, Believe, and Achieve was your first #1, and then Future Boards, and then All the Things I Wish I Knew. And every single one of these books are leaving behind clues of how somebody can create a profound shift like you were able to do. And you haven't just achieved success in authoring books. Obviously, you are a master life coach. You support people in life and in business. You're speaking on stages all over the world. I mean, with Ed Milet and Alex Rodriguez, and the list goes on. And you're on New York Times and the Today Show or Good Morning America. And it's just so impressive at the reach that you've been able to have. So I would be curious, if we were going to give you 5 minutes to share the most powerful and impactful thing that you could share, that if it was the last thing that you could ever share, what would you want to share and give to the audience today?
Oh, such a good question. I think all change comes from our thoughts. And that concept was probably the hardest for me to understand and figure out how to do anything with it. It felt way above my pay grade. It just seemed impossible to be able to control what was going on in my head. But way back in that beginning dark space, I realized that when I started daydreaming about things I wanted, moments, experiences I wanted, even daydreaming of just a better day, things, a vacation that maybe one day I could take, all of that. Every time I went there, I started to feel better. I started to feel good. And the more that I did that, obviously, the more I started, whatever you focus on manifest, right? And then I started really listening to what was going on in my head. And I thought, this isn't really helpful. There was a lot of negativity kind of going on in my head that was trying to erode all of these nice, shiny new dreams that I was giving space to. And that is when I was like, how do I change them? Because they don't make me feel good. They take me right back down into a rabbit hole. And if I start to connect dots, I can see almost exactly where the thought led to the outcome over and over and over and over again throughout my entire life. So I was like, okay, I'm not an idiot. I can kind of figure out there's a correlation there. So how do I fix this? How do I start thinking thoughts that bring me what I want and stop thinking these thoughts that just keep repeating these negative patterns over and over again? And so the thing that I am the most passionate about teaching, and if your listeners leave with one thing today, it is truly that what you are thinking about today, and I would suggest that probably 95% of your thoughts during the day, you have no idea what they are. Absolutely none. I mean, we have like 20 conversations going on in our head as we're walking the dog or doing the dishes or whatever life is giving us, right? We're not paying attention. But if you stop and you pay attention and you're like, whoa, that's creating all day long. I'm creating. What if I just start injecting what I want instead? What if I just start kind of playing a tennis match in my head and saying, no, I'm not going to take that negativity anymore. Instead, I want this. Instead, I want this. Instead, I want this. And the more that I did that, the faster all of those things started showing up in my life. And I have to tell you, I never, ever, ever expected that was going to happen. I had no idea this actually led to an outcome. I was just like, it makes me feel better. So when all of a sudden I could trace exactly an outcome to what I was saying 3 months ago in that intentional way, saying, hey, this is what I want. This is who I'm becoming. This is what's coming for me. Like creating that and then actually living it. I was like, wait a second, why doesn't the whole world know about this? Like, this is insane. So without a doubt, I call it mental tennis. It's the easiest tool that you can use. It is one of the most effective tools for changing your thoughts, changing how you feel in a moment. And the big bang for the buck is the fact that it changes the beliefs, which are core and subconscious and deep. And all you do is reverse the negative sentence. That's it. Just think of yourself like hitting a tennis ball over the net. Just reverse the sentence. Reverse the sentence. Reverse the sentence.
I love that you use two really powerful words and they really are in one sentence together. And that is, first you want to create something and then you want to live it. And the live, that is action. That's getting into the doing. And your first book, you use a word hustle. And I have always shied away from the word hustle because I think that so many people are so busy doing, they're not in the stage of doing what you're talking about right now, which is, sitting with yourself. What are the thoughts I'm having? What are the feelings? What do I want to inject? What's the game of tennis I'm playing? But I love the way you use the word hustle. And that is where you're taking something which is inspiration and then putting it into some form of action so that you can start taking steps forward and supporting people to not only create, but actually live that dream life that they're wanting to have. And it is absolutely beautiful. And I know that behind you, because I asked you before we hit record, for anyone who's listening to us, there is a wall behind Sarah, and every single wall has, there's a wall with images all over the back, and every single image clearly has some story and value and meaning. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about future boards with us.
Yeah. So behind me is my kind of master future board, if you will. I make a new one every year. And the way that I teach manifesting or vision setting or creating, and I'm all about creating your future life. So that's kind of the core of what I do and what I teach. We approach it really, really differently. We're looking at what are the moments and experiences I want to live in my lifetime? How do I want to feel when I've quote unquote reached success? Like, how does that change my life? What can I do then that I can't do now? So we're really looking for tangible ways and real life ways that my life is growing and my impact is changing, just all of that. So it's a combination of asking myself truly, what do I want without the limitations, the big version of what I want, but then how can I translate that into what real life matters to me? Like, if traveling with my kids is one of my most important things and all I have on my wall is the word success, nothing's going to happen. Like, there's just no connection happening there. But if instead of taking the time to put up images of what that trip would look like and how I would feel and the things we would do and the food we would eat and all of that, now I've created emotional connection with the desire. And that's what the universe responds to. Like, that's what it's going to deliver and manifest in real life. And it loves delivering that stuff because that's all joy-based, right? It's not like, oh, I have to make $1 million so that I can be just like everybody else. It's like, I want to have this incredible experience, these moments I'm never going to forget with my kids. And so it's going to deliver all kinds of crazy ways for that to happen when you like maybe never even planned it or, never even thought you could do it right away. So the board is a representation of my dream future life. And to be honest, about half of it has probably already manifested because this is kind of my backdrop board. So if I was being really, really technical on it, at least half of them need to come down and be updated. My board that I go off of each year is the one that I'm looking at in front of me every single day. But yeah, every single picture is about the life I'm creating, both for myself, for my business, my mind and body, my financial future, the things that bring me joy and happiness. But also included in that are the people that I love. So there's lots of things on there that represent my kids too.
So I knew that we would be kindred spirits or souls because we definitely think alike. But my question to you is for somebody that's listening to this and they're hearing you say, you found out your husband was cheating and now you have lost everything and you don't have a bank account, you don't have access to money, you don't have a place to live, you don't have a job, you can't get a job because you don't have daycare. And then you just chose to feel a better thought and then to start taking action. And what if you could do something? And now you've got images on a wall and you're looking at them and they are helping you bring something in. How do we help somebody from that vantage point to bridge it so that they can actually start to stack the evidence? Because I've done it. I know the power of being able to put subliminal messaging in front of you so you can trigger the brain, so you can tap into the end result of the emotion of something that you want. But how do we support somebody right now that's in the throes of going through a shift or a change like you did in 2008? Or maybe they're in the beginning of starting a business, but it's hard and it's a struggle. And to them to make, $10,000 at the end of the month, that would be like somebody else making $1 million, or that would be like that vacation. How can we help support them to be able to start creating the time and the space to do what you're doing so they can achieve the same success and the same result?
Yeah. So, I think it's one of the most important things that you can do is set your dream vision for your future. And that's really hard to do when you're in a difficult situation like you're talking about, right? Like, all our brain wants to focus on is what's going on today. It feels like a dumpster fire burning right in front of us. It's taking all of our energy. We're just trying to get to the next thing. But the problem with that is your progress and your success is going to be so slow if all you're focusing on is the next little thing in front of you or the next step. You have to have a combination of that, which is a little bit of like take action on what's next. But that's only 50% of the game. The other 50% has to be that huge, almost unachievable vision of where you could go if everything went right. And I know that sounds crazy and it's hard initially for your brain to kind of accept it because there's this disconnect between where I am today and this big old fantasy dream future life. But the crazy thing is if you follow kind of the methodology, and I'm very much a tools person, very much a process person. So everything I teach is methodology based. You will automatically kind of get to that place where you can move through those blocks that say, I can't have that. I don't know anyone that has that. That's ridiculous. That would never work for me. And you'll get to a place where it's like, okay, I understand that even if there's a 1% chance that I live any of these dreams, I have to first identify them. That is my job. Like, it's not just going to show up everything I want without me ever saying what I want. It doesn't make logical sense, right? So I have to do my logical part, which is like, hey, universe, in case you're listening, in case anyone cares, like, this would be my dream life. And that is how I teach people to approach it. Because if you're trying to convince yourself it's possible and trying to convince yourself like, oh, I could do this in 2 years or 3 years, like, then you're in a whole different space. Then you're in struggle mode, you're in lack mode, you're in a mode that is not actually going to manifest. But if you can kind of go to this easy place of like, hey, if I could have everything I ever wanted, this is what it would look like. Oh, by the way, I was able to come up with that list. This is what it would be, right? Then all of a sudden you have something to work towards. And so my very first future board that I ever did was at the first job I ever got, which I was making literally nothing. I think 40 grand a year, which covered rent and daycare, and that was it, for a family of 4. And I remember I just went out and I printed all these pictures of the life I wanted. And it wasn't a bunch of just random material crap. It was like, when I am quote unquote successful, I'll be able to take my kids to Disneyland. And what would that feel like? What would that look like? So I put all these pictures around my office cube, again, with no expectation, no like, oh, I need a plan or anything crazy. It was just like, if I could ever live these moments, that would feel amazing. I would feel like a kid in a candy store. And I looked at them all day, every day as I was doing my, inside sales, cold calling and whatever. And they just, again, made me feel better. They made me kind of check out into a happier place. So that is the first thing that anyone can do right now. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to know how it's going to happen. In fact, please don't know how it's going to happen, because that's going to screw you all up. Just put the dream out there. Let it be. Look at it. Let your mind build a little movie. Have a little fun with it. Try to stay away from anything that stresses you out as, in a relation to that. Because the more that you bring ease to it, the more that you allow it to, make you happy, the faster it's going to come to life. And that first board that I made, the first future board, over half of it came to life in about 18 months. And again, when I started, I never thought any of this was going to do anything. I was just doing it just A, because it looked nice, and B, because it made me feel better. So when it started actually coming to life almost exactly as I'd been kind of daydreaming about, and the pictures on the wall, I was a little freaked out. I was like, what is happening here? But I love it. And let me figure out how to rinse and repeat. And now I'm on like my 8th or 9th board. And, I've taken my kids to 7 countries and flown on private jets and on and on and on. So it's absolutely possible, but your job initially is to identify those dreams, identify what your dream life would look like, and just let it be. Surround yourself with it so that it's a reminder all the time. But if you can just live in that space, it's crazy how much is going to start to come to you. And then use that tip that we were just talking about. Whenever your brain starts to kind of take you in a rabbit hole, use mental tennis to get out. Those 2 things change your life right there.
I love so much your energy and approach to how you teach what is actually a very technical and complicated process, and make it so simple. And then people want to create that space. They want that reprieve. They want that better feeling. And you're inspiring people to start doing it and doing it right now. And I will say, just hand to heart, for anybody that is listening and thinking, oh, well, that just sounds like absolute nonsense, I'm going to say, try it.
You have nothing to lose, like literally nothing to lose. Like, why wouldn't you be like, let me be the skeptic? Cool. You're going to manifest a bunch of amazing moments and experiences and all kinds of stuff as a skeptic.
Nothing
you don't
to
have
lose,
to be a believer.
Everything to gain. Absolutely. So you have achieved a tremendous amount of success, and I've spoken about that a number of times today. And I don't define success by, how much money somebody makes. I define it by how happy and joyful they are, and then the impact that they're able to create through living their life in their highest and greatest potential. And you're doing it again so beautifully. I called you the poster child of doing this in the beginning of the episode today. And it's why we wanted you on the Empowered Life podcast. And so there's somebody listening to this episode that is thinking, wow, she can do that because she's a 3 times best-selling author. She can do that because she's a master mindset coach. She teaches people, supports people, she's moving people forward in life and in business. Oh yeah, of course she can do that because, she's been on Good Morning America. But so if we look at all of those things, it's easy for somebody else to identify outside of themselves that it's possible for them. And we like to remind people that we're all capable and possible. And I had read an article where you had been featured and you had just hit #1. And instead of in that moment taking the opportunity to pat yourself on the back about how amazing you are that you became a #1 best-selling author, you turned around and said, if I can do it, if I can literally sit down and write a book and become a bestseller, anybody can become a bestseller. What would you say to somebody right now that's still doubting themselves and thinking that it's possible for everyone else, but it's not possible for them?
Oh, wow. I think that sums up what got me in this in the first place. I started way back when in 2009 with a blog, and my tagline on the blog was called Thoughts, Stories, Life. It still does exist. The tagline was a chick on a mission to prove anything is possible for anyone. And that was all I was trying to do. I was like, guess what? I'm a chick who's on food stamps. I'm a chick who's going to see if I can find a job. I'm a chick who's going to see if, oh, maybe I can like grow in this job. Maybe I can set goals in this job. And maybe one day I can pay all my bills and buy food. Like I was putting it all out there because from day one, I never saw anybody like me. And I will be very honest with you, I don't see one person in the personal development space who's like me, who's doing it by themselves as a woman without any support system, without anybody else kind of helping that journey or subsidizing that journey or whatever the case was. So since there wasn't a voice out there like me, and there was a lot of voices that, like you said earlier, made it very complicated. I was like, man, where's manifesting for dummies? Like, where's mindset for dummies? I don't have time for this shit. Like, give it to me so a 2-year-old can understand it. If a 2-year-old can understand it, I'm good. Like, if I can teach it to my kids, I'm good. So that has always been my mission, is to be the poster child for like, if I could do it coming from what I've come through, like, I promise you anybody can. And, when I got that first book deal, no one was more shocked than me. I say that, but I also had been working on it, visualizing about it, talking about it for about 3 years before it happened. So I did know it was going to happen, but it was the biggest uphill climb there could ever be because I wasn't a writer. I am dyslexic. Like, if you read any of my old blog posts, I used to get more shit about the grammar and the spelling than I got about the content. Like, I am not the poster child of someone who can get a traditional book deal with Simon & Schuster. Like, it just was the most impossible thing. So through that whole journey, I was open about that. I shared that journey, on all of my platforms. And I was like, I'm going to do it. Watch, this is going to happen. I'm going to manifest this. But it was never me sitting on the couch going, woo, woo, woo. I'm going to sit here and only meditate and wake up one day with, no, I was out there grinding. I'd written 3 books before that one got published. I was submitting to every possible thing I could and being turned down for 3 years before I got a deal. So I think, like, not only can every single listener on here achieve whatever it is they want, whether you're super successful right now, but you're kind of going, wait, am I getting close to a plateau? What's next? I've achieved everything I ever wanted to achieve. Now what's next? I mean, that's almost as big of a blank slate as someone who's coming from rock bottom, honestly. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true. I coach it all the time. We have to constantly be moving forward. We have to constantly, I always say I'm forever becoming the woman I want to be. I'm forever creating the life I want, because that's moving. I redo all my stuff every single year to make sure that the target is moving, that I'm never there. I'm always grateful and enjoying the journey at every phase and stage, but I want it to continue to evolve always.
Oh my gosh, I could listen to you speak all day long. And for so many reasons, you just have the most amazing demeanor. And I just feel like I'm getting a big hug. And I just want to say thank you. I have 2 closing questions, and they don't have to be long, but if you want to go on a rampage, feel free. I would love to know, what is the most profound book that you have ever read and why?
Ooh, The Alchemist, 100%. I've probably read it 6 or 7 times. Every single time I always get a new one because I mark it up so much and highlight it so much that when I reread it, I want to have a brand new experience, and I don't want like where I was at 10 years ago to influence that. But yeah, every single time I've ever read it, I've gotten a completely different message. It's just, if no one's read it, it's really incredible. It will impact you on a deeper level every time you read it.
Such a great book. So let me ask you then, because that spurred a follow-up question. So what was the first biggest takeaway? Because obviously that book is so profound in itself. I mean, it's in a category of its own. So what was the biggest takeaway you got from the first time you read the book?
Honestly, the first time I read it, it was so simple that, you get the story on a simple level, but I knew there was a bigger meaning. And I think that just gnawed at me, the part about finding your purpose. And this was way before I was doing any of this stuff. And I was like, well, what is that? And how are you looking all over the world for your purpose? But it was like right under your feet the whole time. And so that has always kind of helped me. And every time I've gone back at it, I've gotten a deeper layer of what that is for me. But I think that initial aha was like, what you're searching for, you are. And that alone takes a long time for it to kind of marinate and, get through all of our layers. Maybe I'll never quite get there. I'll always be going, let me find the next level of that.
I do think the more we evolve, the more our awareness changes. So then we have the ability to see the layers within. And that book for me, when I read it, and I read it when I was young, it was just so validating because it was almost like reading my own thoughts. And it was like, oh, you're not crazy. You are normal. There is meaning to all of this. Life is this magical, synchronistic moment that's unfolding, and you've got to stay present to it. It was really such a great book. And so I'm a big fan, and I love that you mentioned it. First time someone's mentioned on the podcast.
Oh, really? Oh, I love it. Your listeners, go get that book. It is one of the most impactful. I mean, my son who plays college football, I made him read it probably freshman year of high school. And I was like, read it again.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And so I'm going to encourage all of our listeners to go and grab any, if not all, of your books to follow your blog, because it is a massive blog, and the value and the content that you leave everywhere is just incredible. And you've done it for us today. And so one of your books is titled All the Things I Wish I Knew. And so I'm dying to know, not having read your book yet, but I would love to know, what is one thing, having had your life experience, being who you are now, what is one thing that you wish that you knew that everybody else could adopt right now to create the most profound change in their life?
Well, the book has 80. So I love that you made me do one. I initially tried to do 110. My agent was like, no. I was like, well, I have a lot of experience. Gosh, I think the one thing comes back to what we talked about earlier, the idea that I have control over my thoughts, and that my thoughts are a direct predictor of what's coming in my future. Man, if I had known that in my 20s, I cannot even imagine where I would be now. I think that concept, if someone can really wrap their head around it. I talk a lot about it in Hustle, Believe, Receive, the first book. I break it down very, very simply. I give very simple homework for you to figure out how that concept works in your own life, because I think that's super important. But that alone will change someone's life forever. I mean, because it lines up every future outcome: love, relationships, connections, business, success, happiness, how you look, how you feel, like where you live. So if you have one thing that can impact all of that, yeah, I'm on board.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. And so I want to share with our audience, before we hit record, I asked, how can we best serve you today? Time is by far our most invaluable resource. And anytime somebody spends time listening to the podcast, or reading your blog post, or buying a book and spending time on the couch, they're investing in something, in you and in themselves. And I wanted to make sure that we at the Empowered Life Podcast could serve and support you today. And your response was, I want to just support your audience. I want to have a good conversation. I want it to flow. And then I want to give away a resource at the end based on what we're talking about. And so I'm dying to know, what would you like to leave the audience with, and why are you choosing that particular resource? Because you have so many.
Yeah, so I think the one that I want to give the audience is I opened up. So I have 9 steps that I teach, just so everybody knows, on how to create the life that you want. And step 1 is a big one. It is how to set the dream that we were talking about earlier today. It's literally the base point of what winds up on my wall or on my future board. But I have to first get through a lot of stuff to be able to figure out what my dreams are, what they look like, what, if I'm a dreamer or a thinker, how does that navigate, if I'm even able to come up with new dreams. Like, there is a lot in there. And so I have a course that has obviously all 9 steps, but I opened up step 1, which has got 5 or 6 hours of coaching. It's a lot. There's a lot of step 1. And I'm going to give that to your audience for free. It has all of the coaching videos. It has the worksheets so they can figure out how to set their dreams and really start to customize everything we talked about today, so that they can start getting results, so that they can start making their boards, so they can start setting up their future and all of those good things. So we'll have the link there in the show notes, so everybody can just go grab it, download it, and start doing the work. That's all I got to say. Please do the work. Do the work.
I love that the whole episode today, you have reiterated the same message over and over and over. And it's a message that I believe is the fundamental building block for anything, and that is awareness. You need to know where you're going, but to get to where you're going, you need to know where you are. And all you have to do is take a look at who you've been, what has driven what you've done to get where you are right now, and then to start future forecasting, which is all of what you've spoken about. And then that gap in the middle is just taking the inspired action to be able to do it. And you've demonstrated it so beautifully, not only on the episode today, not only through every single response to every question, but through how you live your life. And the success that you have is just a testament to how you have taken what is life and turned it into the most beautiful journey possible. And so thank you so much for mirroring for all of us what is possible when we get out of our own way, we ask better questions, and we start taking action every single day. Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure connecting with you on the Empowered Life podcast. I appreciate you so much. To all of our listeners, thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Empowered Life podcast.